So what is the producer's offset? Well, it's really an incentive to drive film production, and it's probably got two main pushes from a policy point of view, which is the economic rationale, which is obviously the media and entertainment market's a very, very big economic driver in the overall economy in Australia. So obviously the government wants to give incentives to increase the amount of film production. And there is also a little bit of a moral incentive in that we want to get Australian stories up there on the screen as well. So it does have a couple of goals for the producer's offset. The producer's offset actually covers three different incentives. There's the location offset, which I referred to briefly. So the location offset is actually set at 16.5%. It's very much aimed at large studio productions and large independent productions, bringing them into Australia. This is the one that David referred to. There's a top-up you can apply for an extra 13.5%, and that's the one that the federal government just put an additional $400 million in, and that's why we're seeing, I think there are 8 or 9 international productions that have been announced to come into Australia in the next couple of months, while we've got George Clooney coming in. There's a lot of activity up in Queensland, and that's very much, you have to have a budget of at least $15 million to apply for that. So that's very much at the larger end of the market, the studio end of market. There's a post-digital and visual effects, or the PDV. So the PDV is really aimed at post-production and bringing post-production into Australia. And again, if you look at these large studio shoots, your Harry Potters, your Supermen, it allows the Australian post-production houses to really compete on an international market, because they can factor in a 30% tax credit as part of the deal they're offering the studios. And the third incentive is the producer's offset, which is really managed by Screen Australia, even though it's a tax offset. At the moment, there are different rates for television and film, and this is where most of the changes are going to be coming up as of 1st of July. So how does the producer's offset work? It's basically, it gives you a percentage back on your budget. So if you have a $10 million production and you're a feature film and you qualify with distribution, you'd be looking at getting just under 40%. So generally there are a couple of expenses that don't qualify, and I'll cover that later, but there are things like financing costs which you don't get the rebate on. But it basically works as a percentage back on budget. It's really been set up like this because the 10BA, which was an accelerated tax deduction back in the 90s, there was sort of a loophole where you actually got the tax deduction for the investment in the film, and the film didn't actually have to be made. And so that was a loophole that when they were redoing the 10BA and looking at the producer's offset, they said, well, the film's actually got to be finished and delivered prior to us giving you a tax rebate. So that's why it's very much set up on a percentage back on budget for a completed film.